Hey everybody, this is Stephen, and I'm here with my friend John Yates from Stealworks, and we figured we are going to do a small Zoom interview to not only announce our collaboration on Friday, but also to do a little talk about brandalism and graphic design that's sort of placed with corporate ideology in this, that, and the other. We'll keep this short, just so everybody's attention span is not the greatest in the world these days. And not to worry, it's not going to be a reoccurring podcast. It's just a little experiment that we're doing here and this, that. So hello, John. Nice to have met you finally after all this time.
Right.
I'm going to start off with how I got into your work, and it was because of this book that I bought, The Design for Design, that came out. I don't even know when this came out, but I remember buying this probably around 2005, I think, 2006, somewhere around that time.
Yeah, I can't remember when it came out.
It's a while. It's a while. And that's when I came across your work, because I was researching design work in terms of dissent, anti-war propaganda, this, that, and the other. And that's how I came across your work, and that's how we started working together. But we're still working with Burton, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And just wanted to say, it's a massive honor to finally meet you in person, even though it's on Zoom after all this time.
Well, likewise, man.
Thank you. And to explain to all the people that are actually going to watch this, which would probably be like 10, 20 people, but here we go. You started off at Alternative Tentacles, if I remember this correctly.
Yes. Well, my time in the States started, when I moved from England to work for Alternative Tentacles in 1988. Yeah.
1988.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I did a decade with the label.
Okay.
Before branching off to do other things.
Correct. So, but that was the decade when things were interesting, I'll say.
Yeah, it was still, it was still a good time to work at the label. I definitely enjoyed my time there. Got to work with some bands that I still really love, and as friends, not just as musicians. It was a good time. I mean, just ending up there and then sort of stumbling really into like a dream kind of gig was pretty awesome. I mean, I grew up as a fan of Dead Kennedys, and then to end up like sort of collaborating on their Swan Song album with Biafra was sort of really weird, but cool.
I know it was weird. I think any fan going into work, it's a weird intersection coming in from a fan perspective into them working for the people that you admire as artists. And they go, it works really good too, and you're like, whatever, mate.
Right. Yeah, no, it was weird. And then back then it was all. So I worked with Biafra on the booklet for Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death, and he just sent me the usual bunch, envelopes full of clippings divided up into each song, and then just told me to sort of make a start, and then and this is all through the mail. So he mailed me those to the UK.
Oh, wow.
And I did my thing, and then I would mail them back, and then he did a final sort of round of tweaking and stuff like that. But
so,
that was just weird, just to physically do it through the mail. It's like,
well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that reminded me of some of the first T-shirts that I bought when I was still living in Europe, in Eastern Europe at the time.
Yeah.
A friend of mine would bring back a Thrasher magazine from San Francisco to Poland, where we lived at the time. You'd see an advertisement for, be it a Fuck T-shirt or a Thrasher T-shirt. It was 14, it was 93, 92. Like, yeah, I really want this. I really want this. And you would send like a self-addressed envelope to San Francisco, which would take 2 months to get there. And then they would write back saying, well, you need to put money into this thing so we can send you a T-shirt. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it would, it would take like 6 months to get a shirt. But it must have been an interesting experience doing that with design work, because I mean, obviously that stuff changes all the time.
Yeah, especially as I mean, we used to use spray mount, so you just hope that everything made it through without falling off. It's like you're doing collage work. It's a challenge. You hope that everything that you sent shows up as it was intended. I mean. Yeah,
I mean, you wouldn't know either. So like take a picture and send it to it's like, what does it look like? Yeah, wow, fucking crazy.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. To focus on what we're actually doing these days is obviously like we're bringing out this T-shirt and this long sleeve on Friday, and it's it's a wonderful piece of brandalism in regards to the Vans logo, which is perfect. I think it's a really smart thing. I've done obviously the Nike thing and the Adidas thing and the North Face thing and this and the other. I've never thought about Vans, even though it's probably the only shoe brand that I wear and have done.
Right.
And I've never thought of it. It's never even crossed my mind. So when I saw you post that a couple months ago, even, I was just like, yes, fuck, that's so good. But obviously the point I'm trying to get to is brandalism as a, not just like a relevant, but also obviously an important art form. That's how I look at it. I mean, we're looking at huge commercial brands, irrespective of who we're talking to, be it Nike from Sony, Nike, Coca-Cola to whoever, that invade unasked our private space through advertising and through advertising. And I think it's hugely within our right as consumers, as artists, as people to play with that. It's in the public domain, so we will. I seriously don't think Vans is going to send out a cease and desist on this one, only because they tend to be a little bit more relaxed rather than some of the other brands I've done this with. But it could potentially happen. But my question to you then would be, how do you feel about a brandalism in itself as an art form, and then secondly about brands' potential reactions to it?
Well, in terms of like the concept of brandalism, I mean, I see it as a trade-off. I mean, they basically all these companies get free advertising from all of us who wear their products, if we wear their products, and we walk around with those, and you're basically a walking billboard for that product, that company, and they're doing okay. I think the small amount of money or return or whatever you might get out of taking on a brand like that, I mean, I think it's also clearly a nod to those companies. As much as you might have issues with certain companies, the fact that you're taking one of their logos and you're deconstructing it and sending it back, you're basically acknowledging that, okay, this is an amazing, this is a great design, but how can I use it in another way? And it's still clearly identifiable. Anyone who sees the Antifa Adidas one that you did with Martin they're immediately going to know it's Adidas. It's not like it's
such a recognizable thing.
Yeah, it's not like I mean, okay, and they have the argument that what's the typical argument is that you're presenting their brand in a way that it wasn't intended, kind of thing, or whatever.
I think with those guys, when they sent the C&D through, it was a question of just copyright infringement, like a very standard C&D where you're like, okay, well, yes, totally, legally speaking, for sure, but culturally, ethically, commercially,
right.
I mean, it's a highly, I think it's interesting where a brand like that draws a line where they go, well, if you deface an advertising in real life outside, no one's going to chase it up. But if you start making money with it, or if you generate cash and then give it to charity, like what we've done in the past, it's sort of like, it's a big boohoo, which is, I mean, legally speaking, yes, I get it. Morally, ethically, it seems so wild. And I've gotten to the point where doing things like this, what we're doing now and what we've done in the past is almost like you said, it's like it's a nod to the brand. Like we're acknowledging their relevance in our subcultures. We're acknowledging their design work that they've done.
Yeah.
Just making it a little bit cooler. More funner or more relevant, I think.
Right. And honestly, I mean, maybe we're saying something with that brand that they couldn't actually do themselves, because they're not going to try and, I mean, they want all the consumers they can get. They're not going to want to alienate Nazis.
No, of course not.
They're not. It's like,
especially if you're from Orange County, I mean, that's going to be a bit of a problem.
Right. So it's like, it's like they can't maybe say that. I mean, they can have their celebrities and their spokespeople express personal opinions, but they'll always have to be expressed in a personal opinion. They can't be like brand opinion. It's very rare for those companies to take a moral stand.
Well, Ben and Jerry does a good job at it, I think.
Huh?
Ben and Jerry's does a good job at it.
Yes, Ben and Jerry's, yes. But I'm talking about the ones that we've dealt with, you know, so it's like,
that might be an interesting little thing, actually. We should talk to somebody at Ben and Jerry's and see what they have to say. That would be fun. But yes, but it's an interesting, I mean, it's not like, you know, and again, it's not something that we've invented. This has been going on for what, 30 years now? Probably, huh? I mean, if you
more. Yeah.
Probably more, yeah. I mean, I think the earliest. I mean,
the 60s, they started doing it in the 60s that I'm aware of, you know, that was.
Oh, okay.
In some of the subcultures for the yippies and stuff, they would take brands and, you know, they'd start to tweak those.
Okay.
I started seeing it show up in the 60s. And so
okay, I was clearly not around for those days, but yeah. I think the first couple of times I came across it was I think the first couple issues of Appbusters that I picked up around 98, 99, around that time. That's when I really started noticing it. I think and that was predominantly with Nike. I think that was probably my first exposure to it. And I just love it. I think it's really interesting how it's becoming so much more. I mean, there's so much more of it happening all the time. And there's still so many clever ways to play with all these corporate entities.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the cease and desist and their copyright argument, yeah, you can't argue with that. I mean, it's right. You're taking an existing logo and you're knocking it off. You know, it's this, you know, but as someone who spent, you know, 30 years having t-shirt designs ripped off, it's like, I don't care.
And that's exactly, I mean that's a whole nother layer where I come from as well. I mean, the amount of shit designs I've done that I've been ripped off, that you just can't do anything about. I mean, I think in my case, it's not really happened that often, but at one time it was like an H&M subsidiary that had taken a picture of Instagram that, you know, it was photographed at an angle, and it just ran it through a vector program and started printing it off, and it even had the wording but like largest at the bottom of it. And it's just like, what the fuck? You know, what are you gonna do? And there wasn't anything to be done at all. I was sent them an email asking for an explanation. They were just like, well, fuck off.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. So yeah, I don't have any personal qualms about it.
No, I mean, to me, it's part and parcel of anything that's out there in the public realm. I mean, to me, it's like if I pay my money for something, that, you know, if you want to, you can argue property is theft, but I mean, if I pay my money for something, that should be, that's basically mine then, you know, it's like.
Absolutely. So, yeah. It's interesting. It's a wonderful subject, and I'm going to see if I know there's a couple of really interesting talks from the Crime Think Appbusters world on this subject that I'm going to try and dig up and see if I can include this little clip that we're doing here and see what it's about. And again, as I promised, I kept it short. It's been 10 minutes already, believe it or not. So we'll keep it at that. And thank you, John, for your time, and thank you for doing this. Really, I'm truly humbled.